A TSA agent forced a scanner wand into a black CEO's face. He had no idea the man he was humiliating would change airport policy forever. He thought forcing a man to choke would make him feel in control. He didn't realize the man he humiliated had the power to turn fear into fury. Subscribe if you believe cruelty in uniform must always face justice. Step aside. The command rang out across the security checkpoint like a hammer striking polished marble. Kendrick Vale didn't flinch, but the subtle narrowing of his eyes was the only sign that the game had just shifted. The line of travelers behind him paused. Silence fell in short, uneasy layers. Somewhere, a child's voice murmured to a parent. A conveyor belt squealed. Then, stillness. Kendrick stepped aside. He moved with calm precision, every gesture economical, purposeful. His black coat, sharply tailored, barely rippled as he adjusted it. Behind him, Raymond Keene, his assistant, half a step too young but razor-sharp, watched with growing concern. His grip tightened around the portfolio case that held not just their Defense Summit documents, but Echelon Dynamics' encrypted prototype index. This trip was supposed to be routine. Instead, the room had cooled with something older and colder than procedural discomfort. It was personal. TSA agent Darren Holt approached slowly, like a man savoring the moment before a strike. He was tall, shoulders too square to be at ease, and eyes that seemed to scan not just bodies but intentions. His uniform was immaculate, the black plastic badge gleaming beneath fluorescent light. His tone had been official, but his expression wasn't. There was a smirk playing just beneath the surface, one not meant to be seen, only felt. Kendrick had seen it before, in boardrooms, courtrooms, and closed doors that opened only when the right name walked through. It was the smile of someone who believed the system served him, not the other way around. "You tripped the scanner," Holt said, though the beep that followed Kendrick's pass had been barely louder than static. Kendrick tilted his head. "There's nothing on me that should have triggered it." His voice was smooth but controlled, its power lying not in volume but in clarity. A voice honed by years of quiet negotiations and public silence. Holt didn't respond. Instead, he motioned to another guard, then to the handheld scanner wand resting on a nearby tray. His hand hovered over it, fingers curling around the handle with an almost theatrical slowness. The object, a routine security tool, suddenly looked more like a baton than a diagnostic device. Raymond stepped forward. "Is there a problem?" One of the other officers, stockier, younger, less sure of himself, cut him off with a palm to the chest. "Back up?" Passengers were watching now. Some were recording discreetly. Others pretended not to care, but their ears strained for the next word, the next escalation. Kendrick could feel it in the air, the hunger of public spectacle. He was no stranger to being observed, but this had teeth. Holt stepped closer than necessary. Too close. Kendrick smelled the sterile tang of latex gloves and the faint scent of chewing gum on the agent's breath. The wand came to life with a soft hum. "Raise your arms," Holt said, eyes locked on Kendrick's face. Kendrick did so, slowly, refusing to look away. The wand passed over his shoulders, his sides, then hovered around his waist where it buzzed faintly. A flicker of interest passed over Holt's expression, as if he discovered something significant. "You always dress this sharp?" he asked, tone casual, but the undercurrent was clear. Mockery. Disruption. "I don't dress for scanners," Kendrick replied. "I dress for the truth." The smirk disappeared for a fraction of a second. Then Holt dipped lower with the wand, brushing deliberately harder against Kendrick's knees, ankles, shoes, more pressure than necessary. A second guard leaned in, pretending to monitor, but clearly playing backup. Kendrick remained still, eyes forward. His thoughts raced, not with fear, but with calculation. Each second of delay was a ripple in their schedule. The summit briefing, the prototype files. But this wasn't about timing. This was about power. The wand buzzed again as Holt brought it up toward Kendrick's chest. He paused, gaze narrowing. "What's this?" he said, tapping near the lapel of Kendrick's coat. Kendrick's voice was low. "An RFID key for secure drives. Fully declared in my manifest. Still need to check." "Then check." Holt smiled. He pressed the wand harder, enough to push fabric into bone. Kendrick didn't move, though his jaw tightened. Then, without warning, Holt raised the wand toward Kendrick's face. Raymond took a step forward. "Hey." "Stay back," barked the younger guard. The wand's tip hovered an inch from Kendrick's chin. "This isn't standard," Kendrick said, voice quiet but firm. "Open your mouth," Holt replied. Kendrick blinked once. "What?" "Open. Your mouth." There was no ambiguity now. The request wasn't for security. It was a message. Kendrick stood frozen, his breath shallow, eyes locked on Holt's. He could hear his own pulse, faint but rising. Somewhere behind him, a phone camera clicked. The stakes shifted again. This wasn't about protocol anymore. It was about humiliation. "That's not standard," Kendrick began. But the sentence never finished. In one swift motion, Holt jammed the wand between Kendrick's lips, the cold metal slamming against teeth, scraping gum, and forcing its way downward. The taste of copper bloomed instantly as blood welled near his tongue. Pain exploded behind his molars, his jaw contorting instinctively to avoid more damage. The wand pressed farther, bruising tissue at the back of his throat. Gasps echoed. A woman screamed. Someone dropped a suitcase. Raymond lunged, but the guards held him back with mechanical efficiency. "Let go of him," he shouted, rage cracking his voice. Kendrick tried to speak, but the wand pinned his words beneath a wave of pain. Holt leaned in, whispering just above the hum of the scanner. "Let's see if you beep now." The wand buzzed with a synthetic tone, a false positive, deliberate and hollow. Silence followed. The terminal had gone still as if recoiling from what it had witnessed. When Holt pulled the wand back, it was smeared with streaks of blood. He wiped it on his sleeve like a butcher cleaning a blade. Kendrick staggered, catching himself with one hand on the security table, the other gripping his mouth. He could feel the sharp edge of a cracked molar. His throat burned, not just from injury but from fury kept under lock. But he didn't swing. He didn't curse. He looked up. He looked at Holt, and he memorized every line of the man's face, his badge number, his smirk. "You just made the worst decision of your life," Kendrick said, voice hoarse but steady. The gurney wheels squealed against the tile as Kendrick Vale was rushed from the terminal floor, a trail of blood marking the path from the checkpoint. His lips were split, one molar cracked down the center, and the inside of his throat throbbed with every heartbeat. Medical personnel moved quickly but cautiously, unsure whether they were treating an executive or a ticking scandal. Cameras flashed in the distance. Somewhere beyond the curtain of bodies, Raymond Keene shouted over shoulders and shoulders again, fighting to stay close. Inside the makeshift medical bay tucked behind a private wing of the terminal, the overhead lights were too bright. Kendrick blinked hard as gauze pressed against his lip. His face was pale, sweat clinging to his brow, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, were scanning the room, not for help, but for holes, for patterns. "Careful, his jaws misaligned," the medic murmured to his assistant, a tall man fumbling with a cold compress. Kendrick coughed. A thick, metallic taste coated his mouth. He winced and tried to sit up. Raymond pushed gently on his shoulder. "Stay down. You need to breathe." "I am breathing," Kendrick rasped, wincing again. "That's the problem." Raymond sat beside the cot, his face creased with rage and concern. "They said the wand punctured soft tissue behind your upper molars. You need scans. You might." But Kendrick wasn't listening anymore. His gaze had locked onto a small, clear evidence bag hanging from a hook on the wall. Inside it sat the scanner wand, black, sleek, and cruelly gleaming under the fluorescence. "That wand," Kendrick said, pointing. His voice was gravel but urgent. Bring it here. Raymond hesitated. It's logged. They bagged it right after the medic finished cleaning you up. Then unlog it. The assistant stepped away discreetly. Raymond stood, snatched the bag, and brought it close, tilting it under the light. I knew it, Kendrick whispered. The serial code etched along the metal casing was unlike any TSA-issued model Kendrick had ever seen. Most ended with federal asset codes. This one bore a different signature, starting with SYG-AX9. Kendrick's brow furrowed. That's not Transportation Authority stock. Raymond blinked. How can you be sure? Because I helped develop the security key sequence that governs their equipment. That prefix is wrong. It's contractor level. He swallowed hard, pain slicing through his neck. Signal tech. Raymond tapped into his phone. Within seconds, he pulled up a bare-bones database. Signal tech. Defense tech, biometric scanning. Surveillance infrastructure. A quiet but powerful player in high-level security circles. Here, Raymond muttered, turning the screen to show Kendrick. They've been awarded defense projects in the last year. Mostly hush-hush contracts, special access permissions, no public filings. Kendrick's heart pounded. It wasn't just that Holt had been out of line. He had been planted, or worse, authorized. It wasn't a scanner malfunction, Kendrick said, voice flat. It was a decoy. Raymond frowned. Then what was the real target? My genome. Raymond stared. You're serious? I embed part of my encrypted biometric signature into all core Echelon products. It's our anti-theft DNA, literally. Kendrick pushed himself up further, ignoring the pain. Whoever accessed my genome could theoretically reverse engineer our encryption model. But why go through all this trouble just to get it? Because no one would believe it if it wasn't wrapped in humiliation, Kendrick said. They needed a public incident, one that could be passed off as racial profiling or TSA aggression. The outrage would distract from the fact that they harvested proprietary encryption. From inside my mouth, Raymond sat back, stunned. The layers of it were dizzying. At that moment, the curtain swayed slightly. Security guards began appearing at the far end of the hallway, a slow sweep forming outside the infirmary door. Raymond stood up, tense. That's not normal. They're positioning like it's a containment op. Kendrick narrowed his eyes. He's already gone. What? Holt. He vanished the second the cameras cut. This is a cleanup. They're making sure there are no holes. Raymond's fingers twitched near his belt. Then we need to go. Now Kendrick slowly reached for the bagged wand. His grip trembled from pain, but his voice was steel. Then we'll find him before they find us. The fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead as Kendrick and Raymond stepped into the narrow corridor behind the infirmary. The illusion of a formal police interview had bought them just enough time. The guard assigned to escort them had peeled off after a brief radio call clearing their path. Kendrick's voice, hoarse from the assault, was barely audible. No cameras here, he muttered. Raymond nodded, pressing his palm against a coated panel that led into an old maintenance stairwell, long decommissioned but still accessible through Kendrick's private airport security clearance, an old habit from years of government contract travel. Once inside, Kendrick's fingers trembled slightly as he pulled out his secure phone. Blood still lingered in the cracks of his molars and his jaw throbbed with every breath. But pain was secondary now. What mattered was the pattern. The attack hadn't been clumsy or random. It had been orchestrated. He launched a secure app, the interface black and gold, connected directly to Echelon Dynamics classified systems. Open a signal tunnel. Top-tier access, he whispered. Moments later, the call connected. Owen Marr's face appeared, bathed in dim light behind layers of digital encryption. His brows were furrowed, his lips set in a grim line. "You're trending globally," Owen said without preamble. "The footage leaked before they could block it. You've already hit 4 million views. Hashtags, headlines, news crawls, the works. Kendrick didn't blink." Who leaked it? No idea, Owen replied. But that's not the main problem. We picked up encrypted transmissions leaving Northridge Airport right after your attack. Very specific channel. Guess where they were routed? Kendrick swallowed hard. Signal tech. Owen nodded. Exactly. And one more twist. He leaned toward the screen, the tension in his voice sharpening. The packets weren't just security footage. They included partial biometric data pulled from your genome tag. Raymond's head jerked toward Kendrick. Wait, your genetic signature? Kendrick froze, his breath caught in his throat. It's embedded in every product we build, he said slowly. A fail-safe encryption layer. If someone extracted that, they'd have a back door into everything, Owen finished for him. Raymond looked visibly shaken. They attacked you? Just to hack Echelon? Kendrick's gaze dropped, the weight of realization dragging his expression into something darker. Not hack, he whispered. Clone. The silence that followed was razor-thin. Owen brought up a schematic of the biometric packets, spliced strings, data sequences tied directly to Kendrick's proprietary encryption ID. They didn't just want a sample. They wanted the master key. Raymond took a step back, rubbing his forehead. So that wand, what he shoved into your mouth, it wasn't humiliation. It was extraction. Kendrick nodded, jaw clenched. They used my body like a scanner port. A chill filled the air of the maintenance corridor. Even the blinking red lights on the emergency panel seemed to dim under the weight of what they had just uncovered. Owen's voice returned, more urgent. I ran a trace on the wand serial number, just to be sure. The code ends in ST9X. Signaltech's manufacturing ID, Kendrick confirmed. They built it, not the TSA. Raymond's voice dropped to a whisper. It was planted. This whole thing, staged from the beginning, Kendrick's mind was spinning through layers of memory. The odd pause at the scanner, Holt's smirk, the deliberate aggression. All of it was scripted. A biometric theft disguised as a racist altercation. Raymond was pacing now, his voice growing more panicked. If they cloned your genome encryption, that means they can simulate your identity. Log into your systems. Forge your authentication. That's not just espionage, Kendrick. It's impersonation at the executive level. Kendrick nodded slowly. It's more than that. They're trying to replicate access. Imagine what they could do with it. Trigger fail-safes, manipulate defense contracts, initiate internal shutdowns. This isn't a theft. It's a takeover. They moved swiftly from the corridor to a secure underground parking structure where an unmarked vehicle awaited them. Owen guided them remotely, eyes darting between satellite overlays and firewall activity. The air was tight with urgency. Where to? Raymond asked. A hotel I used last year during the summit, Kendrick replied. The back rooms are lead-lined. No digital bleed inside the vehicle. Kendrick kept his eyes locked on the scanner footage replaying on Raymond's tablet. He watched Holt's every move, the angle of the wand, the precise point of contact. It was surgical, and in that precision lay intention. Minutes later, they reached the dimly lit hotel. Owen remained patched in, his voice in their earpieces. There's more. While you were in medical, someone tried to breach our core firewall. Guess where the ping came from? Kendrick stared at the encrypted terminal as they booted it up inside the suite. Signaltech, Owen said. Raymond's hand clenched into a fist. Kendrick's eyes narrowed. Just then, a sharp chime interrupted the data stream. Owen stared at the message that blinked onto his screen. Simple, plain text, but loaded with menace. It read, "You were never the target, Kendrick. You were the key." The hotel room was dim, lit only by the flicker of multiple screens and the occasional passing headlights that leaked through half-drawn curtains. Outside, the city was a blur of neon and shadow, But inside, the air was thick with urgency. Kendrick Vale stood by the window, his reflection fractured against the glass, one hand pressed against his jaw where the pain still throbbed. Blood had dried in thin, crusted lines at the edge of his mouth, a quiet reminder of everything that had changed. Raymond Keene, seated at the small table with a laptop open before him, glanced up. "We traced the signal," he said, his voice low, cautious. "Origin Point matches a private research facility 30 miles outside Newfield. Signaltech's name is on the shell lease. It's buried behind 2 government subsidiaries." Kendrick turned slowly. "Defense contract?" Raymond nodded. "Subcontracted under strategic technology oversight. Discreet, shielded from public registries." In the far corner, Owen Marr, Echelon's chief of cybersecurity, adjusted his headset, patched into a secure relay bouncing through 5 countries. The glow from his screen cast sharp angles across his face. "This wasn't just data theft," Owen said grimly. "They pulled your biometric encryption. Entire chains of code matching your ID marker were in the transmission we intercepted. It's how we traced the signal. Your genome acted like a beacon." Kendrick's shoulders stiffened. "They've got the seed algorithm," he muttered. Owen paused. "No, not just the seed. They've cloned part of your identity framework. Your biological imprint, tied to every Echelon device, every prototype, is now part of their architecture." A cold silence followed. "They didn't attack you to humiliate you," Owen continued. "They attacked you to duplicate you." Kendrick crossed the room and leaned on the table, his breath slow but measured. "So that wand wasn't TSA issue." "No," Raymond confirmed, pulling up a grainy photo of the device. "Modified scanner tech. Serial prefix matches Signaltech prototypes filed under something called Project Mirror." Kendrick's knuckles whitened around the edge of the table. "They staged the entire airport breach just to extract my encryption." Outside, thunder rolled low across the sky, the city blinking under a gathering storm. Kendrick's jaw tightened, not from the pain, but from the betrayal. His body had become the access key to his life's work. Raymond hesitated before speaking again. "We should go to the authorities, Department of Civil Defense, even an ethics review board. With what we have—" "No," Kendrick interrupted quietly, his voice cutting through the room like a wire pulled taut. "If we give this up now, the narrative will spin. Airport incident gone wrong. I'll be painted as a victim acting out. The tech will vanish into a dark archive and they'll have what they came for." Owen added, "And the footage from the scanner attack?" "It's spreading, but some networks are already calling it doctored, and bots are diluting the keywords. They're burying it in noise. They want us loud and reactive," Kendrick said, "because panic can be dismissed." "But exposure? Exposure rewrites the rules." He walked to his duffel bag on the chair, unzipped it, and pulled out a folded blueprint, a rough layout of the Newfield compound, procured through encrypted channels years ago when Echelon had once courted a partnership with Signaltech. He laid it flat. "We hit the facility," he said. "Find the mirror system. Extract the clone sequence, then destroy it before they can deploy it." Raymond blinked. "You want to infiltrate a defense-grade contractor?" "Yourself." Kendrick looked up, eyes sharp despite the bruises. "They used my body as access," he said. "Now I'll use my mind as the weapon." Owen frowned. "This isn't corporate warfare anymore, Kendrick. This is espionage." "Good," Kendrick replied. "Then let's act like professionals." They began preparations in silence. Owen configured remote interference loops to scramble the facility's motion tracking every 18 seconds. Raymond packed minimal gear, no digital footprint, no traceable tech. Kendrick changed into dark civilian clothing, favoring function over comfort. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, controlled. What none of them noticed as they reviewed every contingency was the soft blink of a signal embedded in the lining of Kendrick's briefcase. A beacon. A mistake. A trap. 30 miles away, in the concrete bowels of Signaltech's security division, Agent Darren Holt stood before a surveillance feed, watching the soft pulse of Kendrick's tracker begin to move. He said nothing, just turned to the operator behind him. "Let them come," Holt said. "Let the key walk into the lock." Back in the hotel room, Kendrick stared at the map one last time. He circled a junction point, an exposed conduit near the East Wing maintenance shaft. "That's our breach point," he said. "Blind spot during rotation cycles." "You'll have less than 90 seconds between cameras," Owen warned. "After that, you're a silhouette with a badge on your back." Kendrick folded the map, pocketed it, and moved toward the door. "In revenge, there's power," he thought, gripping the handle. "But in exposure, there's justice." The duct hatch swung open with a dull thud as Kendrick Vale dropped to the cold floor tiles inside Signaltech's East Wing. He rolled silently and crouched, every joint aching from the earlier assault, but he didn't flinch. Behind him, Raymond Keene followed, easing the hatch shut. Through their earpieces, Owen's voice cut through the static. "East corridor clear. You've got 90 seconds before the next camera sweep." Kendrick moved first, his shoes making soft taps against the polished industrial flooring. The corridor was washed in sterile white light. Every surface gleamed with obsessive order, walls lined with locked panels, ventilation humming overhead, and doors sealed with numeric keypads. This wasn't just a facility, it was a machine. As they passed a side lab, Kendrick slowed, drawn by something through the glass. His hand shot up, halting Raymond. Inside the room, rows of scanner wands lay precisely arranged on sterile trays. Each bore a metal tag, etched with an airport code, NRDLINSTCBLH. Kendrick's pulse tightened. "They've been running trials," he said quietly, voice tight. Raymond stepped forward, reading the codes aloud under his breath. "That's international, domestic, even private terminals." Kendrick turned, gaze drawn to the far side of the lab. A monitor glowed, casting blue light across the polished floor. He stepped inside, ignoring protocol. What he saw turned his stomach. The screen displayed a 3D biometric reconstruction, a partial map of Kendrick's own facial and genetic ID signature. Dynamic overlays pulsed across the image, noting enzyme markers, DNA scaffold points, and retinal phase imprints. Above the render was the project name, Mirror 127. "They're replicating my ID encryption," Kendrick whispered. His breath fogged the glass of the nearby equipment chamber. "They're not just storing my data, they're building a version of me." Raymond glanced uneasily at the exit. "How far can they take this?" "Far enough to pass retinal scans. Voice gates, behavioral thresholds," Kendrick muttered. "Everything Echelon built to prevent impersonation, turned against its maker." Footsteps echoed down the hall. Heavy boots. Security. Kendrick lunged for the wall switch and killed the lights. He and Raymond slid into cover behind a towering storage rack, crouched low as shadows passed the glass window. 2 guards swept by, unaware. As silence returned, Kendrick exhaled slowly and glanced toward the monitor again. "They're not just testing," he murmured. "They're building an army of ghosts." The terminal screen blinked once, then again. Then it died. Kendrick Vale's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the room pulsing with the low hum of servers and unseen energy. For a moment, everything stood still in the dimly lit data chamber, the air thick with tension. Then, Owen's voice crackled through the comm line in Kendrick's ear, panicked and sharp. "They're on to you." Motion sensors just reactivated. "Someone inside the system is counter-hacking me." Kendrick's jaw tensed. His hands flew across the interface, bypassing the lag. The terminal lit up again, this time with a mosaic of data pods, each bearing initials, partial genome profiles, and, in some cases, full digital renderings of corporate leaders' faces. It was a harvest, neatly cataloged, organized like inventory. A grotesque vault of stolen identity blueprints. Footsteps echoed faintly beyond the chamber. Raymond turned his head sharply toward the door, one hand resting instinctively on the emergency lock. "We've got maybe 60 seconds, he muttered, his eyes scanning the corridor through the small glass window. Kendrick stared at the screen, disbelief hardening into fury. "This isn't just data. It's a cloning registry," he said under his breath. "They're not profiting from information. They're replacing people." Suddenly, every screen in the chamber went dark again. Then one flickered back on. A familiar face appeared, flickering through static. Darren Holt. His expression was calm, smug, as though the chaos was part of the plan. The dim light from the monitor lit his features in cold blue. "Still chasing ghosts, Vale?" Holt said, his voice echoing through the chamber's speakers. Kendrick didn't flinch. "You turned an airport into a laboratory," he said, his voice steady but low, as though trying to contain the building rage beneath it. Holt tilted his head, like a puppeteer admiring his own marionette. "You built the tech," he replied with a smirk. "We just refined it." Kendrick's hands curled into fists. "We safeguarded identity," he said, almost to himself. "You turned it into a weapon." Before Holt could respond, a harsh, rhythmic alarm blared throughout the building. Red emergency lights burst to life, casting everything in crimson pulses. Raymond moved without hesitation, slamming the emergency lock. Thick metal barriers dropped over the door with a heavy clunk. "We're sealed," he shouted, "but not for long." Kendrick didn't pause. He dove back into the terminal, opening a command port, working through layers of encryption. "I'm downloading the mirror logs," he said. "We need the biometric registry, the development archives, everything." He plugged in a portable drive, his movements precise, fueled by focus despite the ringing in his ears and the tension in his limbs. On screen, Holt watched in silence. Then his voice returned, colder now. "Walk out alive and you lose," he said. "Stay in and you vanish." Kendrick didn't look up. "You already tried to erase me," he said flatly, voice strained with quiet resolve. "I'm still here." The download bar crawled toward completion. Outside, muffled shouts and the rhythmic clang of boots against steel echoed closer. The guards were coming. Raymond scanned the ceiling, then pointed. "Ventilation shaft. 40 feet. I'll lift you." Kendrick yanked the drive free as sparks erupted from the wall-mounted interface, Signaltech's systems trying to burn the evidence before it left their control. But he had enough. He glanced once more at the mainframe and saw something that stopped his breath. A secondary display showed Project Mirror's parameters. It wasn't just his data. There were hundreds of profiles. Not duplicates, simulated identities. Names he recognized. Rivals, allies, government officials. "They're building impersonation models," he whispered, "an entire network of digital puppets." Raymond crouched near the shaft, unscrewing the panel. "Kendrick, we go now." Kendrick's eyes stayed locked on the final screen, its letters flickering in and out of existence. A countdown had started. Not one he initiated. Someone else was scrubbing the system. A choice settled in his chest. "I'm not leaving this behind," he said. With a deep breath, he reached under the terminal and flipped a protected switch. Manual overload, something only developers like him even knew existed. The countdown reset. Faster this time. 30 seconds. Sparks erupted from nearby servers, the whole room humming like a volcano before eruption. Raymond's eyes widened. "You triggered it." "We either contain it," Kendrick said, stepping back, "or they keep growing." The building vibrated beneath their feet. Alarms screamed. Kendrick and Raymond sprinted toward the vent, metal shavings raining from the ceiling. The hallway door behind them shook as guards began battering it down. Raymond boosted Kendrick first, then pulled himself up just as a loud bang cracked the lock seal. Below them, the chamber turned to blinding light. As they crawled through the shaft, heat rising beneath them and smoke starting to leak through the vents, Kendrick's voice rasped from behind, low but defiant. "Truth isn't stolen," he muttered. "It's reclaimed." He shoved the scanner wand deep into the CEO's mouth, laughing as blood trickled down his chin and bruises formed. If you believe no badge excuses brutality, hit subscribe now, because silence only strengthens the abuser. The explosion roared behind them, a deafening thunder that rolled across the Newfield hills. Kendrick didn't flinch. Flames clawed at the sky as the east wing of the Signaltech complex ignited, its mirrored windows shattering outward in waves of red-orange heat. The three men sprinted across the frozen slope, Kendrick, Raymond, and Owen's remote drone blinking faintly overhead until they disappeared into the trees. No words were exchanged, just the sound of breath, boots in wet soil, and the crackle of distant sirens converging on the chaos they'd left behind. They reached a safe point 2 miles out, an abandoned ranger's cabin where Owen had stashed emergency gear. Kendrick collapsed against the wall, sweat tracing through bruises, his coat torn, his voice still ragged from the throat trauma Holt had inflicted. Raymond locked the door and set the portable jammer to block signals. Then he knelt and opened the evidence drive. "It's damaged," Raymond muttered, eyes scanning corrupted file paths. Kendrick leaned forward, ignoring the pain in his jaw. "But not destroyed." Raymond nodded slowly. "There are fragments. Enough to identify the project, enough to expose their operation." For a moment, hope flickered, but it didn't last. The next morning, Kendrick stared at the small TV in the motel room as news anchors launched into their segments. Breaking: explosion at Signaltech research site, billionaire CEO Kendrick Vale under investigation for industrial sabotage. Kendrick Vale, now a wanted figure after being linked to the destruction of federal property. The Department of Homeland Security has issued a preliminary statement calling his behavior rogue and extreme. Kendrick's hands curled into fists. Raymond stood near the window, curtain drawn halfway, scanning the street below for unmarked cars. "They flipped it on us," he said. "Turned you into the villain." Kendrick didn't respond. He was watching another screen, his own image, frozen in mid-shout, mouth open, blood streaked across his face. It was the viral video of Holt shoving the wand into his mouth. The footage had exploded across social media, igniting outrage, protests, and thousands of think pieces. But Kendrick saw it differently now. "They leaked it," he murmured. Raymond turned. "What?" "That video. It wasn't leaked by accident. Signaltech planted it." Raymond frowned. "To make you look like the victim." "No," Kendrick whispered. "To make me emotional. Loud. Angry. To paint me as unstable while they erased everything else behind the scenes." His mind was racing. The footage gave the world something to rage at, but it was a distraction, a flash grenade of empathy while the real crime vanished behind firewalls and fabricated narratives. "They seeded outrage to bury the truth," Kendrick said, more to himself than anyone else. He stood slowly, eyes focused now, the clarity of a man who had seen through the smoke. He reached for his satellite phone and called Owen. The line crackled once, then connected. "Owen, status." "Media storm's been hijacked. Every news outlet is echoing Signaltech's spin. We're trending, but not for the reasons we want." "Then we burn it all," Kendrick said quietly. "Every file, every timestamp, every name. Full disclosure." On the other end, Owen hesitated. "Kendrick, that's not containment. That's total exposure. You'll destroy everything tied to Echelon." Kendrick's voice didn't waver. "Then it will destroy me on my terms." Raymond turned slowly from the window, eyes wide. "You're serious?" Kendrick was already at the desk, the portable hard drive trembling in his fingers. "There's no other move left." They turned truth into fiction. We'll turn fiction back into fact. No filters, no lawyers, no spin. The silence in the room was heavy, like the air before a storm. Raymond stepped forward, unsure. "You won't be able to take this back." "I'm not trying to," Kendrick said. He plugged the drive into the satellite uplink. Owen's voice returned, anxious now. "Kendrick, once you press upload, it's out. No kill switch." "Then I hope they choke on it," Kendrick replied. His thumb hovered over the enter key. He thought of everything: his company, his reputation, the people who still believed in him. He thought of Holt's smirk, the wand, the blood, the fear. Then, without a word, he pressed the key. Across secure networks, in thousands of servers, screens began blinking awake. Encrypted memos, contractor rosters, internal videos of biometric testing without consent, real names, real data, real orders. Kendrick Vale didn't just expose Signaltech, he illuminated the entire chain of command behind them. He watched it unfold in silence, the glow of the monitor reflecting in his eyes. Not rage, not grief, just purpose. And then, in a whisper meant only for the walls, he said, "If they built ghosts, let the world see their faces." The screen faded to black the moment Kendrick Vale's secure broadcast ended. Across living rooms, boardrooms, and newsrooms, silence hung in the wake of his final words. The footage replayed across global networks. Kendrick's face framed in shadows, voice steady despite the scars on his jaw and the exhaustion in his eyes. He hadn't pleaded. He hadn't raged. He had simply revealed. "When a tool becomes a weapon and consent becomes data," he had said, "the question isn't who's guilty, it's who's next." The line was already trending, pinned atop news tickers, quoted in think pieces, echoed in protests. Inside a dimmed apartment 2 floors below a shuttered echelon office in Capital District, Kendrick sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, the only light coming from the flicker of a muted news channel. His face remained impassive as headlines scrolled. "Whistleblower CEO exposes biometric weaponization. Signaltech contracts suspended pending. Investigation, Senate Committee opens emergency ethics hearing. Kendrick knew better than to believe headlines. A soft knock tapped the door once, then twice. Raymond entered quietly, coat damp from rain. "It's happening," he said, pulling off his gloves. "They've frozen Signaltech's contracts." "You did it?" Kendrick didn't look up. "No, we stirred it." Raymond paused, then crouched beside him. "There's more." He handed over a tablet, already loaded. On screen, Darren Holt, eyes sharp but voice rehearsed, speaking to a swarm of reporters outside a federal building. "I regret the way events unfolded," Holt said, solemn. "But I acted under directive. I was following orders designed to protect national infrastructure." The footage cut to anchors speculating, was Holt coerced? A scapegoat? A hero in disguise? Raymond muttered, "He's flipping the script." "They're recasting him as a whistleblower." Kendrick's jaw clenched. "They're burning him to cleanse themselves." The pattern was clear. Signaltech had pivoted. They needed an out, a face to absorb the firestorm. Holt was no longer their agent. He was their firewall. Owen's voice cracked through Kendrick's secure line. He just filed for federal immunity, claiming internal corruption. If they grant it, Signaltech walks. Kendrick stood slowly. His legs ached, his throat still burned from the wand's impact days earlier. "Then we stop him." Not on a screen, not in statements. Face to face, Raymond blinked. "You want to meet him?" "I don't want to," Kendrick said. "I have to." It took hours to trace Holt's digital shadow. Through encrypted backchannels, Kendrick sent a blunt message. "We finish this in person. 1 hour. Terminal 3. Cargo Bay. No cameras, no teams. Just truth." He didn't expect a reply. But one came. 5 words. Then, "Come see the cost." The abandoned cargo terminal near Northridge Airport sat beneath the skeletal outline of shipping cranes and rusted scaffolding. Empty containers loomed like mausoleums in the fog. Kendrick arrived early, accompanied only by Raymond, who insisted on staying nearby, hidden but alert. Inside the terminal, A single industrial lamp flickered overhead, casting long shadows against corrugated steel. The concrete was slick with condensation, the air heavy with diesel memory. Kendrick waited alone near a stack of broken pallets, thumb brushing the encrypted drive in his coat pocket. Footsteps echoed. Holt emerged from the shadows, jacket unzipped, hands open. He looked worn, face lined with sleeplessness and the weight of damage done. No weapon, just silence and defiance. "You're early," he said, voice rasped. "I've been early since the day you stuck a wand down my throat," Kendrick replied. Holt nodded, as if accepting the blow. He approached, slow and deliberate, stopping a few feet away. "You think you won?" Kendrick shook his head, voice quiet but firm. "Not yet. But I know who loses first." The metal door groaned shut behind Kendrick as he stepped into the dimly lit cargo terminal. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting long, uneven shadows across the floor. Crates lined the far walls, draped in thick plastic, their labels half smeared by time and neglect. The air smelled of machine oil and dust, a scent that clung to places where secrets were stored rather than told. In the center of the space, under a bare hanging bulb, stood Darren Holt. He didn't raise his voice. "You came alone." Kendrick nodded once, stepping cautiously forward. His eyes flicked around the room, no glints of glass, no muffled movement from behind crates. For now, it was just them. The man who had brutalized him at an airport in front of the world, and the man who had turned that violation into a global reckoning. Holt looked older, his shoulders slack, eyes duller, jaw unshaven. The arrogance from before had faded into something more complex. Guilt, maybe, or weariness. "They told me you'd disappear after Newfield," Holt said, his voice rough. "You didn't." Kendrick stopped a few feet away, face unreadable. "You didn't either." For a moment, silence hung between them. No one moved. "They burned me," Holt muttered, stepping into the light. "I did everything they asked. Ran the field tests, used the wand, extracted the data, and when the world saw what happened to you, they needed a fall guy?" He laughed once, dryly. "So, I became the villain." "You were the villain," Kendrick replied, voice sharp. "You assaulted me." Holt didn't flinch. "And I regret it. But you need to know, I didn't design the game. I just played the hand they gave me, Kendrick's fists clenched at his sides. You still made the choice to humiliate me. To jam that thing in my mouth like I was some machine being debugged." "They made me believe it was for national security," Holt said, his voice cracking slightly. "They said you were a threat. That echelon's encryption could destabilize defense grids if it went open source. That harvesting your biometric pattern was containment, Kendrick's breath caught. The depth of the deception was worse than he thought. But it was just commerce," Holt finished quietly. "Surveillance sold to the highest bidder." Kendrick's posture shifted, not relaxing, but softening. The anger hadn't faded, but a new emotion joined it. Disgust, pity, and, beneath it all, guilt. "You could have stopped," Kendrick said, stepping forward, his tone low. "You had access, reach, knowledge. You chose to be the hand instead of the mind." Holt's expression darkened. "So could you. Years ago when Echelon sold its prototype to them through a shell contract. Remember that? Gentrace version 1 ? The name cut like a blade. Kendrick had buried it deep in old reports, an early encryption model sold to a third-party tech incubator. But if that shell firm had been a signal tech front... He staggered back a step. His mind reeled. "They used my code to build the cloning platform." Holt nodded grimly. "The foundation of Mirror was yours, Kendrick. You didn't know, but you enabled them. Just like I did." For a long moment, Kendrick stared at the floor, battling the storm rising inside him. Betrayal, shame, disbelief. He'd fought so hard to protect his legacy, only to realize it had been weaponized in the shadows. Holt reached into his coat and produced a microchip sealed in a static-proof sleeve. He set it gently on the crate between them. "This is the original code link," he said. "Destroy it, and the mirror collapses. Every derivative node will fail." Kendrick reached out slowly, as if touching a memory he never wanted to hold again. His fingers closed around the chip. It was lighter than he expected, an object small enough to vanish in a pocket, yet heavy with consequence. Before either man could speak again, a flash of light flared across the windows. Headlights. Holt's face snapped up. "They're here." The crunch of boots and the static click of radios grew louder. From every side of the warehouse, shadows moved, armed agents breaching the perimeter with silent precision. "They're here for me," Holt said urgently, backing away. "I'm the leak." "I broke protocol by giving you that chip." Kendrick's instincts kicked in. He scanned the walls, locating an old maintenance hatch half concealed behind a rack of crates. No time for farewells, no time for explanations. As agents poured into the building, Holt raised both hands and shouted, "They're here for me!" Kendrick didn't look back. He bolted for the hatch, pried it open, and ducked into the dark. Behind him, the last thing he heard before the chaos swallowed the room was Holt's voice, raw and resolute. "Expose them all, Vale." Every last one, rain hammered against the windshield as Kendrick Vale gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale, his jawline rigid beneath a smear of dried blood. Each wiper swipe smeared his fractured reflection across the glass. Eyes hollow, skin pale, lips cracked and crusted from the assault that had turned his mouth into a war zone. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. The silence in the car was thick, broken only by the occasional groan of rubber on glass and the faint whisper of a man holding himself together by threads thinner than code. The safe house sat low against the hillside, a concrete bunker disguised as a rundown storage unit. No markings, no signal. Kendrick pulled in, headlights off, and parked beneath the overhang. Inside, Owen Marr waited beside a web of monitors and hard drives humming with encrypted life. His face was drawn, pale under the fluorescent lights. "You made it," Owen said without looking up. Kendrick entered wordlessly, handed him the chip, and collapsed into the worn metal chair across from the terminal. The air smelled of ozone and solder. Owen inserted the chip and watched as lines of code began streaming, fluid at first, then erratic. "We can dismantle the mirror network with that chip," he said, tapping a key. "But—" Kendrick leaned forward, voice raspy. "But what?" Owen's expression darkened as he zoomed in on the code base. "It's rewriting itself. Constantly. Every few seconds the code mutates, overwrites, and protects. It's not just a map, it's a recursive algorithm." Holt embedded a failsafe. Kendrick's throat tightened. "Explain." Owen turned to face him fully now. "If we use this chip to collapse Signaltech's mirror network, it won't just shut them down. It'll trace the foundational code back to its original source, echelon dynamics." He hesitated. "Which means everything you've ever built will go down with it." Kendrick stood slowly, staring at the wall of monitors. One showed biometric maps. Another, fragmentary blueprints labeled Project Mirror. All born from Echelon's early work, his work. "It's designed to destroy its origin," he whispered. "Self-erasing sabotage." Raymond burst into the room, soaked and breathless from the surveillance sweep. "They've already spun the narrative," he panted. "Sabotage. Rogue CEO. Signaltech's legal teams are feeding press releases to every outlet. If you use that chip, you won't just be erased, you'll be blamed." Kendrick closed his eyes, letting the weight of the dilemma press against him. Save the company or erase the weapon. Protect Echelon or ensure it could never be used again. Owen spoke softly. "There's still time to walk back from this." But Kendrick opened his eyes with clarity. "Maybe it was never mine to keep," he said. His tone held no self-pity, only finality. If the foundation was compromised, then so was everything that followed. At dawn, Kendrick sat alone in the server room. The hard drive hummed beside him, the chip now wired into the master node of Echelon's global network. He tapped a few keys, no hesitation. A secure feed activated on one screen, streaming his anonymous statement to the global press. He narrated every hidden layer of Signaltech's deception: dossiers, blueprints, emails, authorizations. It was raw, unfiltered truth. "Final sweep complete," Owen's voice crackled through the comms. "Are you sure about this?" Kendrick didn't answer. His fingers hovered over the final command prompt. Then, with a single keystroke, he initiated the mirrored collapse. Servers blinked. Backups failed. Mirrors cracked in every continent. Echelon's legacy began to disintegrate like ash in wind. Data streams froze mid-frame. Core systems shut down in silence. Raymond, watching from the hall, whispered, "It's done." Inside the server room, Kendrick remained seated, staring into the empty black screen where his life's work had once flickered. "They took my voice once," he whispered to no one, to everyone. "Now they'll hear my silence." The news broke before dawn. By 6:04 a.m., every major network was looping the same haunting footage: Kendrick Vale at the airport, blood on his lips, his eyes burning with something deeper than pain. What followed wasn't a headline, it was a reckoning. Signaltech's empire began to collapse like a tower pulled from its base, each revelation loosening the next. Covert biometric harvesting, unauthorized genome mapping, field trials conducted without consent. Legislators scrambled. Hearings were convened. Executives fumbled through denials, only to be cornered by encrypted files Kendrick had uploaded just days before. The scandal exploded into what news anchors would soon call the largest data ethics collapse in modern history. And yet, Kendrick was gone. No press conferences, no final broadcast, no trace. As Echelon Dynamics servers blinked out across continents, many assumed he had perished in the cascading failures. The public theory, whispered and spread like digital folklore, claimed he had died during the mirrored collapse, his own systems pulling him into the void he helped expose. But the truth wasn't that clean. In the quiet hollows of encrypted recovery forms and abandoned dev boards, something strange began appearing. Fragments of a manifesto. Not angry, not defiant, but reflective. The messages came in pieces, never traceable, sometimes in code, other times disguised in old security patches or buried inside deprecated firmware updates. One line repeated more than any other. "If humanity becomes its own surveillance, then freedom is only found in ignorance." Owen Marr read those words in silence, seated in the back of a makeshift congressional hearing room. He hadn't slept in days. He didn't need to. Since Kendrick's disappearance, Owen had taken up the mantle, quietly leading a new global coalition on transparency and technology. The movement had no name, no logo, no office, but it had Kendrick's voice, or what remained of it. He closed the terminal window displaying the latest decrypted message and looked across the room. The Secretary of Tech Oversight was being grilled about Signaltech's contracting records. Another senator demanded answers about federal databases tagged with genome metadata. Behind them all, the name Holt surfaced once more. Court documents revealed a stunning twist. Darren Holt had, in his final hours before arrest, submitted hundreds of sealed internal files to a regulatory body. His statement, delivered via legal proxy, read, "I acted under direct instruction. I did not choose the method. I only followed the mirror." The phrase caught fire in media circles. By week's end, Holt was posthumously exonerated. The man who shoved a wand down Kendrick's throat was now cast as a reluctant whistleblower. Owen's jaw clenched. He knew the truth. Holt had been a tool, yes, but not a hero. And yet the system that had used Kendrick's body as a password was now polishing Holt's name into redemption. In private, Owen said nothing, but in action, he built. Within isolated corners of the web, a new encryption model began to circulate. Unlike anything Echelon had licensed before, this framework left no trace, no backdoor, no metadata, only silence. It was open source, permissionless, impossible to register. Developers began calling it Veil Key. It spread faster than anticipated. Airport terminals quietly withdrew handheld biometric scanners. Airlines implemented manual checks again. Internal memos cited sensitivity concerns. But Owen knew the real reason: fear. Signal tech had become a global example of what happens when power forgets its limits. The public didn't want surveillance anymore. They wanted control. Or, more accurately, they wanted the illusion of safety without surrendering autonomy. Still, Kendrick remained a ghost. There were no confirmed sightings, no verified messages. The fragments of his manifesto had stopped 2 weeks ago. Owen often sat late into the night, refreshing the old logs, watching for new entries. Nothing came. One night, as rain tapped against the windows of the Coalition's data center, Owen was asked by a reporter during a live stream, "Do you believe Kendrick Vale is dead?" Owen didn't blink. "Kendrick Vale isn't a man anymore," he said softly, the hum of machines behind him like distant thunder. "He's a question." A warning, the broadcast ended. In the following hours, hundreds more downloaded VeilKey. Outside public view, Owen approved another internal policy. All biometric features across Coalition-partnered platforms would require dual consent, full disclosure, and non-retention. A permanent change, etched not by law, but by memory. Later, as he sat alone reviewing a legal settlement from one of Signaltech's shuttered subsidiaries, he found a metal case in his inbox, unsigned, unmarked. Inside was a hollow wand. No circuits, no sensor tip, just a thin metal shell. Owen stared at it for a long time. Then he placed it on the desk and spoke to no one in particular. "Sometimes," he murmured, "the only way to build trust is to lose everything that measures it." The knock came hard, 3 measured raps against old pine. Kendrick Vale didn't flinch. He sat alone at the corner table of the cabin, soldering a copper coil to the back of an outdated shortwave transmitter. His fingers moved steadily, despite the burn scars across his knuckles and the faint tremor in his left hand. A gust of cold wind slid under the cracked window frame as he reached out and flipped the dial on the transmitter. Static surged to life, a low growl of white noise filling the silence like an old ghost clearing its throat. Another knock, slower, this time softer. He rose from the stool, coat wrapped around his lean frame, boots heavy against the floorboards. His jaw bore the pink seam of a healing wound, a reminder not just of injury, but of survival. The cabin, buried in the snow-draped solitude of Argon Valley, offered no protection from memory. Only distance, only quiet. Kendrick opened the door. Raymond Keene stood on the porch, wrapped in a long wool coat, hair grayer than before, cheeks flushed with the sting of wind. He didn't speak at first, just nodded. "I wasn't followed," Raymond said finally, voice low, tired. Kendrick stepped aside. "I didn't ask." Inside, the fire snapped gently in the stone hearth. Raymond glanced around, taking in the stripped-down room, radio equipment, half-melted snowshoes, a rusted kettle on the stove. There were no screens, no signals, no past. Only breath and snow and the echo of what had been lost. "You're not easy to find," Raymond said, lowering his bag. "I wasn't trying to be," Kendrick replied. He poured 2 cups of black tea, both bitter. "How bad is it?" Raymond took the cup, warming his hands. The world kept spinning. Signaltech's buried, but fragments still surface, private labs, shadow accounts, broken mirrors trying to rebuild. But people remember. Committees are quoting your name again. He looked over. "You're still the ghost that scares them." Kendrick didn't smile. He simply sat back, eyes narrowing against the flicker of the fire. "Fear can teach," he said quietly. "But memory makes it law." Raymond pulled something from his coat, a small parcel wrapped in linen. He unwrapped it slowly and placed it on the table. A wand, nearly identical to the one that started it all. But this one had no inner circuitry. No pulses, no hidden scanners. Hollow, empty. "I thought you should see it," Raymond said. Kendrick's eyes lingered on the metal cylinder. He reached for it with surprising calm, weighing it in his palm. The cold surface held no threat, only reflection. "I kept it clean," Raymond added, unsure why he was whispering. "You kept it honest," Kendrick replied. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Outside, snow fell gently, brushing against the window in slow spirals. Kendrick reached into the drawer beside the radio and pulled out a small velvet pouch. From it, he retrieved the original biometric chip Holt had died to protect, the one that had rewritten systems and toppled empires. It no longer functioned. Kendrick had burned its core months ago, but he kept it, always. Raymond saw it and sighed. "Still carrying ghosts?" "They carried me first," Kendrick said. He stood and walked to the window. The lake below was frozen solid, reflecting the white canopy of the overcast sky. Kendrick had come here to disappear, but the world hadn't stopped speaking his name. News broadcasts, encrypted forums, even university lectures used his legacy, sometimes twisted, sometimes reverent. "They think I'm gone," Kendrick said at last, his voice touched with something between resignation and freedom. Raymond moved beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You know they think you're gone," he said softly. Kendrick's eyes didn't move from the snow-covered horizon, but he nodded, faintly, the corners of his lips bending into the first trace of a smile in months. "Good. It means they're finally listening." He turned back to the table, picked up the hollow wand, and pressed it into Raymond's hand. His grip lingered for a moment, not out of hesitation, but as if sealing something unspoken. "Keep it," Kendrick said, a reminder of what truth costs when power forgets to ask. Outside, the wind had softened. Snow fell in hushes, blanketing the world in white. The old radio hummed softly, its signal weak but persistent. Somewhere far off, voices spoke of accountability and reform. Kendrick listened with closed eyes, and then, quietly to the cabin walls, he said the words he had never spoken aloud, not to a court, not to the press, not even to Owen. "Justice isn't revenge," Kendrick murmured to the quiet. "It's the memory that refuses to die." He mocked a man's pain, and moments later choked on the same device. If you believe justice always finds its way back to the cruel, subscribe now, because power without respect always self-destructs. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores racism, abuse of authority, and the moment when prejudice collides with accountability. Its purpose is to raise awareness, inspire empathy, and encourage reflection on justice, equality, and respect for human dignity in all spaces.